So I will call the meeting to order. Let me start by apologizing to the audience. This is not how we're usually set up these days, but this is how we've been set up for budget workshops. And tonight's meeting includes a budget workshop, so I apologize that some folks have their backs to you, which I'm sure they don't like. I have a message from Marla saying that she's not going to make it tonight. Her back went out. So Patrick or Liz will, well, actually Kim's here, so Kim and I can take care of the meetings, I think. All right. So I don't have anything to change about the agenda tonight. So let's start with, are there any comments from the public on items that are not on the agenda? Okay, perfect. Let's move to the consent agenda, which contains a number of items tonight. Is there anything that a board member would like to pull from the consent agenda? Okay, then I'm going to do this, Kim. I'll entertain a motion that we approve the consent agenda consisting of the minutes from the budget workshops of January 22nd and January 29th, approval of warrants, approval of recommendation for a professional appointment, approval of requests, plural, to be released from contract, right? Yes, I think there are two. And approval of leave requests. Thanks, Kim. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to a request from the High School Diversity Club. And they are bringing to us tonight a proposal to fly the Black Lives Matter flag. I'm sorry that we got your request after the time we had already had our second January meeting. I know you were hoping to fly the flag the whole month of February, so I apologize for that, but I'm pleased that you're here tonight. So is there someone who's going to start? Yes. Please identify yourself first.
Hi, my name is Paulo Matos. Hi, my name is Montia here. We're students at Essex High School and members of the Diversity Club here at Essex. Before we start, I know all the members of the Diversity Club, I'd like to thank the board for putting us on your agenda and letting us speak tonight. The Diversity Club has been running for 2 years. We've had a very successful year last year. We were granted permission to fly the Black Lives Matter flag May 31st for the rest of the year. And here we are again, trying to propose another because the Black Lives Matter flag is not just a flag or a symbol. Black Lives Matter flag, when that flag, and it welcomes and it acknowledges every single black life that comes to Essex and passes through this community. When it flies, if it flies in February, it will be acknowledging black excellence and will be acknowledging the movement of black lives. Because in a school that less than 8% is African American, one can feel isolated.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that it's not just for black lives as well. It's also for students of color in our community and not just the school. So it's representation of everyone and also education and letting everyone know like what this is about and what's going on in our world right now.
It will bring inclusiveness it will make a better today and a better tomorrow for everyone. When that flag flies, it doesn't only say only Black Lives Matter, it says Black Lives Matter. It acknowledges everyone, and it will make EWSD aware, and it will make a great community of EWSD, and it will show how proactive we are with the race issues. It's significant that we fly this flag because it's important that in a school where a minority can feel, me being Latino, it can bring welcoming and feel welcome to the community.
Yeah, so our main point is inclusiveness in our community, making everyone feel welcome and everyone being comfortable being in the school environment.
Yes. That is why we propose to raise the Black Lives flag on February in celebration of Black History Month and Black Excellence. We would like to see it flown for the rest of the year. We are also proposing that we add a Diversity Club bulletin box in the gold lobby where the flag can safely remain when it is not raised due to circumstances last year of a flag being stolen. By flying the Black Lives Matter flag, we hope that it will spark, and it's shown last year that it sparked discussions on race in our community. The demonstration of inclusivity also shows support and acceptance to all students of different races and ethnicities.
Excellent. So I'm going to open it up to board members who may have questions for you. Questions? Keely?
Not so much a question, but just a comment that I like how you tied it into our vision. And I like the idea of the display, but that would be something for the building leaders? Okay.
Do you understand what Keely's saying? That it would be up to the principal, not up to the board, whether you can have a display case?
Yeah.
Great. Other questions or comments? Yes, Brendan.
Hey, last year when the flag was flown, I know there was a bunch of activities that were sort of part of the whole experience, and I just wonder if you could give us a sense of some of the other things that are going on to promote dialogue and discussion in the school.
Yeah, so we also are planning on doing like posters, so talking about why we're raising the flag and what the flag is about, so that we're also posting it in the school, letting them know what's going on and what we're trying to do and what we're about to do. Also, we plan on celebrating it in a way where we're all coming together. Either we're just getting a small group or maybe making it like a bigger activity. Also giving another speech as to what we're doing and why we're doing it and commemorating the big event and the big movement that's going on.
I just feel like it's important that we educate and we just demonstrate why we're doing this action. We were speaking on maybe speaking on the intercom so that people really understand why we're doing this and why we want to bring awareness with the flag.
Mm-hmm. Also stressing the importance of our community and making everyone feel included as well.
It's very important.
Great. Other questions or comments? Kim, and then back to Brendan. Liz, is your hand up?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay, I'm appreciative of the proposal and the framework that you guys are laying around this for inclusion and alignment with the vision. And I'm just wanting to clarify the request is for the remainder of the school year.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going Liz first,
Yeah.
and then back to you. Liz.
Again, thank you so much for being here and for your thoughtful and really articulate and wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. And the guidelines, as you know, suggest a shorter period, and one of the things that I think might extend that period are the kinds of things that Kim is talking about inside the building, about a year, activities that would last throughout the school year that could keep all of this alive. And so to the extent that you've thought about those, if there was some conversation about what that could look like over the course of the next few months, I think that would be really helpful to as a way of celebrating why you want to have it and make it part of everybody's experience day to day as they come to school throughout the year, not just for this month. So that would be something to consider if there were activities in place that would support that.
It's a question for Beth, actually. This is the second year that students have come forward with this request, and I just wonder if you and your leadership team have discussed ways that some of the issues and topics that were spurred by the discussion are actually incorporated in the curriculum in any substantive way that helps broaden the conversation about these issues?
We haven't gotten to the level of what's in our curriculum, but we have, through our continuous improvement plan and our focus on equity, discussed it and have had conversations about it, but not to the curriculum level. That could be next.
Well, I'm just trying to think
Should
of
be
other
next.
ways that we can
Yeah.
enrich
Yeah.
the purpose of this.
Yeah.
Right.
Send them out to teach.
Yeah. Well, I guess almost a little bit to that, Beth. I understand advisories changed or morphed or shortened or moved around a little bit with Flex Block, but I'm just wondering if student-facilitated conversation in common times might help to support a continuous conversation, like with the structures that currently exist. Is there thinking around how to optimize those opportunities and maybe have students lead some of those conversations, or teach the teacher, coach the student, or however it becomes co-facilitated in meaningful ways? And we've seen really great work by lots of students in lots of arenas around that. So
You made me think about Mr. Reardon was supposed to be here tonight, but he has the flu, so he apologized. He is in agreement with us, but that would be even a question for, him
yeah,
to
just
answer. I
thinking.
don't know if Andrew, you want to speak to that, or bringing it to curriculum or advisory, or?
I'm a school counselor at the high school. I believe that anything that we can do to strengthen the the capacity for social emotional learning for our students would be at a premium. At a time with state testing and increased expectations for proficiency-based grading and academic standards, it has been, I think, hard for our administration to rectify the balance between the two. But yes, I think advisory is a primary structure where conversations could take place. I think it's important that we as adults take the lead in providing venues and programming and leadership, and we really take responsibility for that end of the conversation. And there's work to go there.
Yeah. I'm appreciative of the thoughts around it, and I'm also moved every time we have the chance to facilitate with students, because I think, as you've demonstrated tonight, as we've had the opportunity to learn through our co-facilitation around engagements through the last 2 years, students are very impactful and well-led. I think bring a message more powerful maybe than adults. So in thinking about structures and times that create space without compromising the academic time, I think it only makes everything more rich. So I'm grateful that you guys are thinking about that.
And we realize that as staff, as educators, we all need training in implicit biases and all of that work, which Andrew has begun that work at the high school. We've done some with the leadership team, but we are nowhere near all that we need to do.
Yeah.
It's ongoing.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Grace.
Okay, this is a question for the board, for Laura and I. Do we have to approve the flag flying every school year? Is that a rule?
Every
There's a time frame.
Every time the group wants to use the flagpole in a new school year, yes, it has to come to the board.
And the
Did you-
guidelines put a time limit on how
And-
long they can fly it for.
Right, and did you have a chance to read the guidelines? So the guidelines have to be followed each year.
They're our guidelines, they weren't like created by somebody
Right,
else.
that's
They-
an important point.
Okay, yeah.
And we spent a
There's
lot
not a
of
law.
time on them last year, so I think from now on, requests shouldn't take the kind of time that the requests last year took. Because we were still feeling our way through what were the guidelines we wanted as a board to use. Is that helpful? Yeah. Keely?
So, a couple of things. I think it would be very easy, at least for me, to say, fly the flag for Black History Month. Let's give them some extra time into March because there's a vacation and we didn't get started at the beginning of February. I think going beyond that to the end of the year, we should be aware of the fact that some of the people in our community who most need to have a discussion about inclusion around matters of race are not in our schoolhouse. And when we're flying a flag that's outside, we're making a statement to the whole community. And we had hoped, I think in October, to have a series of community conversations around these issues that didn't end up happening because of capacity. And I think we need to think again about how we can do that, because like somebody who's my age or your age and grew up in Vermont did not have the experience of having even 8% of the student body not be white. So we need to find ways that we have somebody who's not these students, because we can't put it all on you guys, who's able to have those conversations with community members as well. And the only thing that I see in the policy that we want to like check off still would be if you guys have done a petition this year, it'd be cool to know like, yeah, lots of people at Essex High are still.
So why don't you answer that and then move on?
Yes, we've held a petition less than a year ago to see if Essex High School. So we wanted to first see if the students were approving of this Black Lives Matter flag, and we got around 500 signatures that wanted the Black Lives Matter flag to fly, which gave us confirmation that yes, we have support with the student population.
But you did not do a new petition this year?
2019, no.
No, okay. No, what, I would just comment that it's not going to influence my decision about this, but I think the one thing a petition does for you, even though it's a lot of work, it gives you a chance to have conversations, particularly with freshmen. And so, just for future reference, I think it is worth considering doing that. Liz, and then Kim.
So I don't know how many of you are aware of the Voices for Education group that has formed and the work that has been happening in the community over the past 3 years through that has had a focus of being welcoming and being inclusive. And in December there was a community summit with that focus. Some of the outcomes of that, and a really strong outcome of that, is a group in the community that would work with the community and the school as to define what that would mean, some kind of group that would be making sure that equity was being applied, and that there would be, that administrators and boards and municipalities would be held accountable for having that lens when they made decisions. So there is a group in the community that's linked through to the school that is working on that, and I would really, really encourage all of you, any of you, to please get involved with that work as we figure out how the school and the community relationships can improve and how we can do this together, clearly understanding that we can't do it alone and that it will take this kind of collaborative endeavor. And so I would please encourage you to check that out. It's on the EWSD website, and you would be more than welcome to join us in that steering committee and be part of planning how to move that work forward. So that's the first thing I would say. The other thing is that to that and to the equity lens that the board is using and the district is using as a framework moving forward, I think there is room for that conversation when you spoke about not just Black lives, but people of color and marginalized people in this community and how that flag could represent that. When we move into what we were talking about communications in May and September and then moving to October, to explain to the community that equity framework and what that means and why we're using that framework leading up to, how we are trying to move forward as a district, I think it would be a really great reminder and conversation starter to have that, as long as we backed it with the conversations that need to be happening at the same time. So thank you for being here again. Appreciate it.
I was going to point out that body of work that happened at the summit in December, because it was focused on equity and inclusion. And the previous fall we had done a conversation to help inform the vision, and those were 4 weeks in October. But this one took a little different shape and was a solid morning in the beginning of December to speak about inclusion and equity in our broader community. And while I know schools don't do it alone, we can often lead, I think, in these areas. And so I would be supportive of certainly the month, as well as if there's ongoing activities that support this body of work. I think from my standpoint, it's not just a flag flying, it is an intentional effort to focus our internal community's attention on this matter, and to the extent you guys can, we, all of us can think about where that allows space for community members to join us. There are groups in our community that are very supportive of this work. Outside of even Voices for Education, other groups within Essex and Essex Junction and Westford, I think, would be very interested. So I would be supportive of this extending through the school year, especially if you guys can make some plans that help make this feel like a dialogue for your internal community as well as your external. And that's not to put it all on you, because it is very much so in line with the vision work that's happening throughout our district and the equity work that Voices for Education has tried to shepherd in the most recent conversations. And that, as Liz mentioned, there's ongoing work there that's been identified that people have had some excitement around. We'd love to have you guys join us for that. And I think you'd find it aligning really well with all the stuff you guys are doing, and can actually also have some capacity to help you organize things that you guys might have ideas for that we could help organize with you, or create a framework for a conversation, or so thank you. And I see it to be very much in line with what we're doing in our communities, both internal and external.
Okay, so Patrick, and then I'd like to have a board discussion about our response to the request, and I'd like to give these two a chance to sit down.
So, yeah, you guys can actually sit if you want. I actually don't have a specific question. It actually already lends to that, Martha. I was actually wanting to see clarification, because the procedure is that we receive a time frame they've requested from now until the end of the year.
Right.
And we as a board have mentioned maybe 2 weeks or maybe a month, like the request is to the end of the year, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, end of the school year.
Thank
Thank you.
you. And if we say anything in our discussion that you would like to respond to, just raise your hands. But for now, you can sit down.
Thank you.
Okay, so because we had so many discussions last year, because you had forewarning that this was going to be on the agenda tonight, we did warn it for action. If anyone's uncomfortable with that, we could talk about that. And also, I just want to hear responses to the request. Keely.
I just have a procedural question that if there's anyone else in the audience besides the official representatives of the
Sorry.
Diversity Club,
Good
do
point.
they speak before or after we discuss?
Yes. Hi.
Hi, my name is Marita Canedo. I'm not only a parent at the high school, but also I belong to Migrant Justice in Vermont. And I just want to thank the students for doing all this, but I want to add a few things. First, about the curriculum. There is a bill that is passing soon about creating a curriculum and having standards to talk about the real history and having more representation of people of color in the schools and administration. So that's something that you should take in account. Second thing, if you have your own rules as a board that every year people has to ask permission, just take in account that for us people of color that are fighting for human rights, coming every year to tell you that we matter, coming every year to prove you that we need these examples of standing up for our community, it's a lot of weight to bring every year. Thank you for all the ideas that you brought to the students to have understanding and workshops and more activities, but it's really important that the adults and the administrators take and stand up not only for a month. We always talk about Black History Month, but it should be history, period. So just be acknowledging that it's really important for us not to be recognized just only a month or ask for this recognizing every year. It's important that when we stand for human rights, it's not temporary. It doesn't have a day that ends, so we do it forever. Thank you.
Anyone else? Does anyone on the board want to? Whoops, I'm sorry. Oh, I apologize. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Henry Harris. I'm with the National Lawyers Guild. I came last year, and I just wanted to thank all of you. I know that you do this work out of service to your school district and your community, and it's a lot of work. And so thanks so much. Trying to negotiate these things must be very difficult. I would also just like to say, I'm hearing a lot of dialogue about this procedural obligations and things of that nature, and I've got to agree a little bit with Ms. Canedo in terms of, here are these kids who, against the sort of like social odds and impositions that are stacked against them, many of which any of us who enjoy white privilege or have white privilege may not understand like at all. But these kids are showing initiative. They're showing up and asking for something that doesn't actually take a compromise of any kind from their community, and it should just be rewarded as robustly and completely as possible. The idea that, but we have these guidelines compared to these brave kids in Vermont. When you're the kid or one of the few kids of color in your class, you have to show up and be that kid of color for every time there's an issue around people of color. Is it going to be about sports? Is it going to be about justice? Is it going to be about different kinds of cultural orientations? And for them to have to show up and do this again, and like as Ms. Canedo said, for the second year in a row, that kind of initiative and leadership is the result of coming up a much steeper climb than I think maybe some of us might be able to understand or recognize, and they should just be rewarded profoundly for doing that, and we should be reaching deeper than the things that they're asking for. I'd just like to add quickly that the Guild and Marita works with Migrant Justice, as she said. We've got youth from a statewide youth network. We're thrilled is majority youth of color led. That's working with Black Lives Matter Greater Burlington and the Make Arts Collective, and we would love to work with the Essex School District to provide extracurricular arts, history, convene different kinds of discussion and dialogue with the student body or with the school board. But we'd like to meet y'all part way and really try to encourage you to do any and everything that you can to promote this, especially not just considering the odds of the minority folks of color here in Vermont, but in terms of the global context, the national context. There's just a lot at stake, and really using this as an opportunity to push for youth leadership in an uncertain time would be something that we in this network would really appreciate, and we would like to support in any way we can. Thanks.
Would anyone, anybody else in the audience? Okay. Would anyone on the board like to reflect on the comments we just heard?
I think the only thing I would offer is we struggled with figuring out our responsibility with respect to the flag pole. Not whatever else happens in our buildings. I think we bear a lot of responsibility in that, but as an elected board and a governmental statement of speech, I can't recall the law that requires us to set some guidelines around what goes on the pole, not what happens within our buildings and all the other ways that we can be meeting and supporting our students of color and our communities of color. So I think that was a process that took us some time last year to figure out how we would do that in keeping with the law and our requirements, and setting a timeline on it was part of what our lawyers had recommended, so that we would have potentially, if there were multiple interests in flying, other parties inquiring in ways that aligned with our vision, we would have the opportunity to create some guidelines that led us through that process each time. So last year was a long process, and very grateful for the students at Westford especially had really led us into that body of work, and then the Diversity Club as well came with that work full-throated, and so we were very fortunate. And I think as we put that lens on all of these requests, it's not in the intent to be onerous, and I absolutely appreciate what you're saying, because that seems like an unnecessary hurdle each time. And I guess we can figure out how we address that going forward within the context of guidelines that weren't arbitrary or capricious, but rather we're trying to be keeping with our responsibilities. But put the way you've described them, I completely get it. And I think that's something for us to just be mindful of as we consider these.
And we all heard the advice from your attorneys last year, and it was relatively vague, and it seemed like it gave you a lot of opportunities and sort of an open hand for how you want to deal with government speech on the flag.
And I think that's a little bit what's great about the proposal in coming in a time frame that puts the lens on it, that allows it to ask us all to do better than just not just raise a flag. That's one piece of it, but what else can we all do, whether it's through curriculum or imperfect conversation, because we're going to get it wrong more than we get it right initially, but let's get at it in some way. So I'm excited to have our students push us in that way. Thank you.
So just to follow on that, like, I think we're not trying to say we just want to do things for a short period of time. What we're trying to say is that there's different things that the board has more or less control over for different reasons, and some of them will allow for a much more permanent representation of Black Lives Mattering than the flagpole. The flagpole being at this weird intersection of federal and state and us. Like, you have to fly things at half-mast and take them down at certain times. Whereas if it was like, let's put a mural on the side of the school, then that's something that the administration can make a decision and it'll be there forever. If it's, let's put this display shadow box in the front entry to Essex High School, if we convince the principal, which I'm sure that Beth can convey the feeling of the board and your many well-expressed ideas about how this is aligned with the vision, then that's something that can be there for years until there's no longer a student presence that is saying that this matters to them, which hopefully would only happen at the point when somehow we've entered the American utopia and it doesn't need to matter anymore because we all love each other. So yeah, like, unfortunately, we can't control everything in the district, but there are many things that can go on for a long time.
Correct. Okay, what are board members' thoughts, other thoughts about the request? Are we ready for a motion? Somebody want to make it?
Yes, sir.
Want me-
I move
Thank
that we, I move that we
Thanks.
approve the student request to fly the Black Lives Matter flag through the end of the school year.
Okay, is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same nay. Great. Well done. All right, thank you all. So we will move on now to a budget presentation from Bob Travers.
How did we manage that?
Saw Bob. He's hiding somewhere. There he is.
They don't know how good it's gonna be.
I'm gonna just kick us off and then get kicked out and hand it over to Bob like we did our last time with this. And just quickly, you also have these slides in front of you. Just on a recap from our last meeting. In the last meeting, we worked on reflecting our vision, our values, and our commitment to equity in our budget development. And all the principals, or a number of the principals, joined us. Those that didn't join us know that they should next time. And they spoke about particularly the areas of instructional excellence and social emotional engagement. Key focus going forward for instructional excellence that they spoke about is time and training. And the key focus going forward with social emotional is really supports and systems. And Dylan did a great job in kind of leading that, that part of the discussion. The budget was reorganized to be seen through the equity lens. Educational spending in that first draft was going up 1.88. Equalized pupils are still nearly flat. We did get the 9th addition. So last time was 8, and shortly after the meeting, I got number 9. So we bumped up a little bit more, but still waiting to see what happens. And then with the first draft of the budget, the base incentivized tax rate before the common level appraisal is going down. So that's the recap. This is a view of what we still have left. We have this evening's meeting and a focus on Center for Technology. And the 12th is a budget session. I think we probably will need to make sure that we may look to warn a 2.5-hour budget session potentially. So just as a heads up, just so that we have a good amount of working time. And then, for the 12th, the 19th is another board meeting, and we'll be going into promise of merger and a full budget walkthrough. And then the 6th, which I believe is starting to gel towards the change of date on town meeting week, we would have the ability to sign warning if we're ready for that. And tonight's focus is Center for Technology, and our speaker this evening is Principal Director Travers. There you go.
Fantastic. Which one is that? The far right.
I'm gonna say
This one? Yeah. This one. Great. Thank you.
Who's right or that right?
We went to the same
Who's
school.
right?
Yeah, you can tell by our accent.
Yeah.
When I sit closer to him, I put ours where they don't belong.
Yeah.
And take them away from where they do. I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to meet with you tonight. I think my focus is really on bringing to you information about the students, the programs, and our initiatives, especially as you view them through the lens of the budget. What's not in the slide presentation, but I'll mention, is last year was the first year we formed a regional advisory board in many years. Before that, CTE was meeting its obligations in legislation to make presentations and seek guidance from the Workforce Investment Board. That group disbanded, and so we reformed a regional advisory board that's made up of required superintendents, principals, and business leaders from the community. They're representative of all of the schools that send to us in our service region. It's important to mention that because one of their key roles is advisory around programs and around budget. So I'll be making a presentation to the Regional Advisory Board coming up soon about the findings of the budget preparations that we've been going through. Speaking about the 10th version of your your equalized pupil numbers and other information that you need from the board, I think CTE has actually suffered in a different direction. That is, not a lot of information has been traveling from the state. We use a 6-semester average, full-time equivalent 6-semester average. That drives our revenue numbers. And so it's very important to get an accurate count on that. And I think we have it now. I wanted to point out that following the formation of EWSD a few years ago and our group's visioning process, CTE discussed and defined our own values. It's important that we establish these values every year because our cohorts turn over much more frequently than do a high school. We can have a large group of students for 1 year and then they leave, or 2 years, and we do have students that stay with us for 3 years. So on the back of that shirt, this is one of my favorite photos. I snapped it while students were waiting to go to an off-site event. You can see our values. Belonging, I think, is the most important for us because our students come from 9 different sending high schools. We also have a fair number of daytime adults, and you'll see in our information that we can be a rather diverse group. It's demonstrated in our numbers, how they break down, and it's an imperative for us to focus on equity. I'll point out that we started the year with 403 students and a little bit over 365 FTE. That's the formal number that we receive. Our IEP 504 and EST numbers are higher than any of our sending schools. It makes for challenges. I wouldn't turn away a single one of any of the students that are on this list. Our ELL percentage is growing every year. We're now up to 11% of our student body. They mainly come from Essex, Winooski, and Burlington, but we do have ELL students from, I do believe, all of our sending districts now. Our free and reduced lunch is higher than the average high school. The number that you see there, 40%, actually does not include the Essex High School students that attend us and qualify for free and reduced lunch. So I believe our numbers reflect a higher percentage. Those are the schools that send to us, but at any given time, we can actually have schools from outside of our service region. Those are the schools that include in our service region. And we started the year with 12 daytime adult students who have diplomas. We actually have daytime students who don't have diplomas. Those are our programs. We offer 18 programs with 25 different enrollment sections. All but dental and health informatics on the right-hand side, the 11th and 12th grade offerings, have second-year programs. So we list them in program areas, such as building technology, but there are 2 sections of building technology. There are 2 sections of childhood ed, and so on. Actually, in professional foods, there are 3 sections because we've started an intro to hospitality and culinary arts, which is at the sophomore level. A reminder that state law says that sophomores have access to career and tech ed, but high schools are not required to allow them to attend. I believe that's something that we'll see a change in very soon. Frankly, Vermont is behind the times. Yes?
Interrupt. So in that high schools don't have to pay to send them, do you have sophomores for whom we're receiving tuition?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
One of our largest sections of program offerings is our pre-tech. So in the 9th and 10th grade list,
Yeah.
the first 2 are block schedule classes. They are offered to Essex High School, and Essex High School students can take those in an A, B, 90-minute block schedule. The remainder are our pre-tech programs. We are designed to be able to take more than 64 sophomore students in our pre-tech programs. Pre-tech programs are an incredibly important program offering for us. We tend to keep about 80% of our sophomores into their junior year. And about 60% of those continue on to their senior year. So we have students who we refer to as 3-year wonders.
Is that then the fact that it's not required isn't necessarily preventing schools from sending their students with tuition, or are those all Essex kids?
No.
They're here?
The students in the pre-tech program come from all of our sending high schools. Some sending high schools participate at a much higher rate than others. Some high schools actually do not go out of their way to provide access for different reasons. Especially with the advent of the freshman experience, and now that's building into the sophomore experience. We're hearing feedback that they really want to hold on to their students. You'll see later in one of the initiatives, we're working on satellite pre-tech programs offered at the sending high schools that are expressing concerns about losing their sophomores. Yes, sir.
Are we allowed to accept students from private schools?
Yes, we have a number of students from Rice this year. We always do.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Since we tuition back to the sending district based on residents, that's who would receive the bill. It gets very complicated.
Tell me how pre-tech works. Does the school pay a tuition, or are they counted in your rolling 6 semester?
Yeah, so the concept of tuition is that we don't, one of the misnomers is that the tuition the money follows the actual student, and it doesn't. It follows the FTE broken out by sending district. Sophomores are built into the calculation of FTE, and that district is sent a bill for that student of that in that 6th semester.
Right.
Right.
But
that calculate the.
If you send a sophomore, you don't get a bill back for that. No, the number is built into the FTE calculation. Other questions? So, where are we? This is, I think of this as a quick sample of our students at work learning. So we used to use the tag phrase CTE, the school that works. Who you're looking at, top left, that's the computer animation web design classroom. That is Jimmy Jang, who was presenting to the regional advisory board about some work that he was doing. Very proud CVU principal to see Jimmy's progress. Top is a picture taken of our Pro Food students serving seniors on our Community Appreciation Day. That's a day in November, 2 days actually, that we open up to all community members, but focused on seniors, and they get a variety of services within the center. Top right and bottom right are 2 photos of pre-tech class building a trail, or rebuilding a trail bridge in Colchester. The reason I included this is this was last year. When I looked at the photo of all the students standing on the bridge after they completed it on the bottom, all but 2 returned to us. So the majority of those students are in 11th or 11th grade programs this year. And the bottom picture is a group of natural resources students ready for the day. They were actually posing in front of our brand new front loader that we bought last year, or this year, with Perkins money. So replacing a piece of equipment we bought in 1975. And still in service. Okay. The next slide. CTE provides academic instruction as well as technical instruction. We offer 34 different sections of academic classes. They are delivered either as standalone pull-out classes that are offered during periods 1, 2, or 7, 8. As well, they are offered in an integrated instruction model whereby our highly qualified teachers are assigned to programs, technical programs, and they teach academic courses in context of the technical program. So you could go into a classroom tomorrow and see one of our algebra teachers teaching math in context of any number of programs: cosmetology, building trades, automotive. Same with literacy. We have a highly qualified science teacher who actually teaches anatomy and physiology that's recognized by all our sending high schools as part of health informatics. So we really try to teach our academics in context of the interest area that the students are here for. And one more word about that. It's really important for us to provide these classes as an all-day model so that students feel that they can meet their graduation requirements and have access to things like art, PE, and driver's ed.
Yes.
Thinking about the highly qualified teachers,
Right.
are the classroom experiences of a teacher in a non-tech environment transferable enough that that moves between high school and CTE easily, or it just seems like potentially a different delivery model that you'd be gaining expertise in slightly different models?
Right. So the model is co-teaching model in the integrated learning environments, where the technical teacher works with the academic teacher to develop curriculum, to find the math and automotive tech, the science and culinary arts. And through that model, I believe the technical teacher becomes more confident in knowing what they know. But I hire an automotive teacher, not a literacy teacher, and yet we get English credit in automotive. So you'll see later in the presentation when we're talking about our literacy initiative, one of the things that will make us more successful over time is that attitude of all staff members at CTE taking on the responsibility for student growth in all areas. I don't expect an automotive teacher to be a literacy teacher, but I do expect an automotive teacher to assume the responsibility that literacy is their responsibility within their program as well.
And Bob, we do share instructors.
It gets rarer and rarer because our bell schedule doesn't align. Right now, I share 2 instructors with Essex High School. Other questions about that? What's also interesting about CTE is our academic offerings are at the post-secondary level. That's a list of all of our post-secondary course offerings at the center. There are 26 different post-secondary courses offered by 8 CTE teachers who are recognized as adjunct faculty members to VTC and CCV. I've included the course codes because if a student earns credit in that, the student gets that credit on a transcript from those colleges. And they meet their high school graduation requirement. This model mostly features technical content. However, the first 4 offerings are actually standalone classes offered periods 1-2 to any student who qualifies for Intro to College English, English Comp, Pre-Calc 1, Pre-Calc 2. Pre-Calculus. That was either you or me on a tiring moment. Last year, 26% of our eligible students earned college credits. So again, that's 26% of our 11th and 12th graders earned college credits. And it's not unusual for a student to leave here with 12 to 22 college credits. One of our students recognized as a presidential scholar nominee in the Excellence in Career and Tech Ed area is going off after 2 years with us with 22 credits.
Amazing.
And by the way, it's a very effective cost model. That's at a $100 voucher per student. So what I want the board to know is that those teachers took on the responsibility of having their curriculum reviewed by the faculty senates of those schools to go through a approval process. Most of them, if they're not already at a master's level, are working towards their master's, so they'll be recognized by the post-secondaries as meeting their requirements. How it works is, since they've revised their curriculum, all students get the post-secondary level instruction. They don't discriminate between the students in their class who are going to earn the credit or not. What happens is, mid-year, the teacher recommends to the student whether they should enroll in the post-secondary course that is part of the instruction they're already receiving, and that student, if they do enroll, takes on more responsibility within the class and has to complete the final requirements, whether they're project work or finals themselves. So the teacher isn't teaching two curricula, they're teaching one curricula that is at the post-secondary level. That's right. CTE is not your parents' voc tech school. We have an active National Technical Honor Society and an active student council. The student council right now features committee work like student voice, environmental focus, the yearbook committee, and currently we're working with the Essex High School student government on the open campus initiative. We don't plan dances, and we don't have battles of the band. Those are the only two things that I ask them not to bring to me each year. So our mission continues to be both college and career ready. Two important indicators for career readiness are our industry recognized credentials and our workplace experience. All of our 11th and 12th grade programs have industry recognized credentials. These are third-party valid and reliable curriculum and evaluations that actually mean something in the area of work that the students are preparing for. We offer 33 different credentials throughout our programs. Last year, 81.5% of our students who were eligible earned at least one industry recognized credential. Many students will go away with 2 or 3. The workplace experience is headed up by our co-op department. Our co-op teachers coordinate career work experiences, either in 2-week shadow, unpaid shadow experiences, or something that looks more like a paid co-op experience for students. Last year, 82% of our students participated in at least one. Most of them participated in 2 or 3. We work with more than 400 area employers to make sure that we have opportunities in all of our program areas. These are really hallmarks of career and technical education. So these are photos of some of our outreach. So in addition to hosting Senator Sanders at the end of last year, who led a student focus group on the role of career and tech ed and whether college is necessary or not, we hosted Governor Scott's cabinet at the beginning of this year, the Capital for a Day outreach. We've also met with Essex Economic Development Commission, members of the State Workforce Investment Board this year, and coming up next month, we're hosting Essex's representatives Houghton and Redmond to tour the facilities. Every program at the center also features a program advisory committee made up of employers who are also business leaders or community leaders. Want to brag a little bit on the students. So for this year, I just picked 3 samples of awards and recognitions. This year, 8 of our computer animation web design students qualified for early decision at Champlain College in a nationally recognized, very competitive game design program. Elliot Mara, who is a Burlington High School senior, new to us this year, his first year at CTE, is one of the captains on the Burlington High School hockey team. He attends the business residential program, which is the building residential program, sorry, which is the section of building trades that builds the house every 2 years. He was recognized as Athlete of the Week, and finally, Jimmy Jang and Thazen A, Jimmy from CVU, Thazen from Winooski were recognized as Vermont Presidential Scholars in the Excellence in Career and Tech Ed area. So those are some photos. Elliot's the top left. If you find the link, it's a great video feature of this young man. He's a very interesting young man. Jimmy is in the top right with Secretary French, thank you. I wanted to call him Richard for some reason. And Hazen in the bottom left. And then the group of the 8, I've come to just refer to them as the Gang of 8. What I do believe, anecdotally, is many of these students would be overlooked in a traditional school because they don't have the interest that's driving their efforts. Faizin is an ELL student who actually is recognized at the center as being an outstanding public speaker. So, not a very confident student, but she's one of those students who I hope realizes her power because she's an exceptional person. talking about our initiatives going forward. Following Act 77 and 189, we're working pretty hard to meet expectations related to middle school outreach, proficiency-based graduation requirements, developing relationships with our sending schools to develop satellite programs offered at their school. Additionally, we have taken on the work of improving student literacy and doing that work via the PLCs, and I know you're all up to speed on PLCs here. One note that I would say about PLCs in a career and tech ed setting, we don't have a common viable curriculum that binds 10 teachers. You can't pull together 10 automotive teachers to talk about the viable curriculum within automotive. We've grouped our PLCs around like programs, and we're working hard to identify the common viable curriculum that might be low-hanging fruit in the beginning of the process to engage the teachers. Next year, we believe we'll be working on workplace readiness, which has been in our center translated to the transferable skills that have been published by the state. And a little bit about our literacy initiative. Oh, I'm sorry. So one of our initiatives is the Math and CTE program that's been going on for 2 years now. We currently have projects at ADL and at EMS. These projects put CTE teachers in partnership with the ADL and EMS math teachers at grades 7 and 8. They have developed career-based math instruction. These students are completing their grade level math requirements while working with CTE teachers and their math teacher. So typical programs this year would be a group of this was last year, a group of students went to the building site that our 11th and 12th graders were building and calculated the volume of earth that was coming out of the hole so that the foundation could be poured. That problem also included the idea that soil is aerated when you move it, so we had to calculate the physical volume but also the value of that volume, because every truck that leaves a site costs money. So they had a real-world problem with a 7th grade math approach. They also took a 2-scale model of the building. They took to build site plans of the building, built a 2-scale model, then they brought that, and all the math that's involved in that, they brought that to the site, oriented themselves in the building, and then we asked them to calculate costs for what a kitchen would be given the site layout. So cost of materials based on the dimensions and their interest. These pictures are actually of last year's 7th grade cohort from ADL who had a unit on math in food. So they worked with our Pro Foods program. I gotta tell you, any student anywhere at any level, they're motivated by food. And they'll eat what they cook. I guarantee it. I've seen kids that won't eat asparagus, eat roasted asparagus because they made it. And so these are just some photos of them. They worked in the bakery. And what was really fun last year at the end of the year, one of our teachers actually owns a food truck. He let us borrow it. These students produced a menu to be delivered to their teachers at ADL at lunch out of the food truck.
That's awesome.
A lot of fun. One of our initiatives is literacy, and we're working with partners in for literacy and learning. This is their logic model for working. This year was a study year. Next year is a planning year, and the following year is a curriculum year. So what I want you to focus on is in their logic model. Valley is, some of you may be aware of it. I'm looking for what it means. It's the Vermont Adolescent Literacy and Learning Initiative. They are very noted for working in lower level schools. Lower grade school, sorry. So one thing that we were focusing on were the conditions of success. This logic model is a model that requires them to collect data and then match that data to the 4 conditions of success, and to build an action plan that will describe the results of success for each one of those conditions of success. So they were in our building. Those are the conditions of success. Strong teacher expertise, focus on the student learner, comprehensive and systematic approaches, and committed leadership. They came in this year, and their methodology for collecting data included surveys with faculty. They followed a certain number of students a full day in their instruction to see what their experience was. They interviewed those students. They interviewed the administrative team. They interviewed the ELA teachers. That's the focus group. They looked at many of our documents, including tests and curriculum. And they did informal observations with teachers. They recently fed back to us a pretty comprehensive report. I'm happy to share it with any of you. We haven't shared it with our literacy team yet, but this is an example of one of those conditions for success. That's the comprehensive and systematic approach. So they made a summary statement about what they saw based on what they were looking at, and they reported out, if we're going to be successful in this condition, here are our strengths, here are our limitations, and these are our considerations. So I have one of these charts for each one of the 4 conditions of success. That will drive our planning going forward. Priority building is seen there. These are the summary statements that they believe we should be considering as we move forward. And our next steps chart. This coming week, we're going to meet with our literacy team. After that, we're going to bring it to the PLCs. The goal is to create a action plan and curriculum that goes along with that action plan. One of the things I want to say about literacy is that I think it's important to reinforce literacy at the center as an equity issue. We have a pretty motivated student population, but too many of those students every year come to us deficient in literacy and numeracy. Those are measured by the Agency of Education and reported to the feds for Perkins grant money. They're known as FOPL, federally agreed upon performance levels. They're reported by program, and they're reported by cohort. So I can find out how my non-traditional students are doing, my ELL students are doing. They're measured in ways that don't make a lot of sense right now. They were measured by the high stakes tests, NECAP and SBAC. Students weren't engaged in those tests. I think so there's a lack of understanding by the students about how they should be working hard on those tests. I'll tell you that I triangulated some of the data, and I could see on a recent SBAC report that students who were earning college credits and had A's in their local courses tanked on the SBAC test, and I think it was because they just didn't care. It wasn't relative to them. So we're looking at ways of changing the tests. But literacy is a matter of equity for us. We're committed to addressing this as best we can. I believe this is the right approach going forward. Our goal is to make every staff member at CTE part of the solution to provide them the knowledge and skills that they need in order to make a difference with students in context of the curriculum that they're teaching. We have open house this Saturday. You're welcome to come. That's sample student work. The photo was taken by the students, the postcards were printed by the students, and the models are students. They actually came up with the theme. I don't know if you see it. I had a hard time seeing it at first. They are
Awesome.
They are mocking CTE. So, you're welcome to come. We're going to be working with middle school students from 10 to 11 in closed workshops that they've already signed up for. It's a way to put middle school students in touch with program teachers doing hands-on activities. And then we open up the cafeteria at 11 o'clock and we'll be done usually by 1:30.
Bob, the middle school students,
that you're able to reach, are those ones from within our district specifically? I'm assuming.
So we are reaching out to all of our 26 middle schools that are in our service region. That's a big job.
Yeah.
They're already busy enough. So we're building ways to try to create relationships with those middle schools. Part of it is in the programming, like the math and CTE. Part of it is in visit days. We've done a number of different initiatives to try to draw them in. The students that are signing up for this actually represent all of our sending districts. Their parents come with them. While the students are in the workshops, we herd the parents into an informational meeting and ply them with donuts and coffee.
But we are running a little short of
I'm sorry,
time.
yes.
No problem. It's so fascinating, but I'm conscious of all
Yep.
that. We still have to do the rest.
Great.
You can do that.
Yeah, so I'll just go into the overview. So Bob's budget is built completely different than we do the others, which is we come up with a net amount we need for taxes. Bob actually works the other way around on revenue. So as he said, that 6-semester average. This slide right here shows you the diversity of population. Here's the counties that are represented. These all have students at one point in time. And again, the actual students attending is not what we bill on, it's on this 6-semester average. And you can see that in some cases, like a Colchester, we might be dropping off 45 students where we've just brought on 27. But in other cases, we've got 29 that have come on and 27. So it's a constant recruitment battle. Literally, his school starts fresh nearly every year. When we take a look at the expense summary, we've broken it down by the same instructional programs, instructional support, and administrative. And the key part here is his budget. He has managed to go up 1.7% on his expenses, and we know that that's a extraordinarily constricted budget. On the revenues, he's needed to manage a drop in the tuition in the 6-semester average, a slight drop in there. So he's needed to manage some of the others. He's brought in and helped slightly by a higher fund balance like we've seen in the others. So some help coming in there, but then a 1.7% increase. What that nets to be is $17,000 for tuition. This year's tuition is $16,850, so it's just under a 1% increase. If you take that and look at it over the last, what were we saying, 7 years?
7 semesters.
But how many years?
That's over almost 4 years.
Almost 4 years has gone up about 2%?
Yeah, not even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what Bob continues to do is knows that this number of tuition is what impacts our district as well as all of them. And tuition, it can be one additional barrier for sending schools. So over the last number of years, he has managed the budget to be almost, non-impactful to the sending schools. This is the cost that impacts EWSD and our tax rate. As a host, we actually charge CTE for use of the building, which then gets distributed through the process of tuition.
It's always fascinating to listen to you, Bob. Questions, comments? We may have some as we digest this, and we'll funnel them through Brian House.
Hey,
I just wanted to say the ads currently running on Channel 3 are really well done.
Thank you.
Professional.
Yeah,
And reflect the excellence of the school.
I appreciate that. It's a real important piece to us.
And
Anything else?
I think just really one sort of comment is that I really appreciate the value that CT brings to the community. Because I think that, as Vermont in general struggles with keeping kids here, a program that is providing jobs directly out of high school is so valuable, especially ones that, we know are going to, immediately come out and make an incredible salary if they're, really, focused on like some of the design work or, automotive training. It's just, really such impressive work that's done, and I think it's also just overall for the state, like, just a great way for us to keep kids here that we don't want going out of state and losing that talent. So
It's a great point. These are the students that stay.
yeah.
These are the students connected to the state in ways that maybe more traditional high school students are less inclined to remain. Two of our areas that we're looking at this year are cybersecurity programs and advanced manufacturing for development over the years. Great.
I guess I was just wondering if there's areas of the things that we as EWSD bill the tech center for. Like, I'm guessing that things like administrative technology services with all the telephone equipment and stuff is stuff where we're making those decisions, and then those are having an impact on the costs for the tech center. And I'm wondering if there's some way that we can have an awareness of that in the future, like these things, some of them get charged to the tech center and affect their costs.
Yep, absolutely. We can break down and kind of reveal what the sharing is. It's but again, it's one of those situations in a standalone, like a Hannaford or a North Country.
That they would have to pay for
all that infrastructure's required solo. So paying for a portion of the nurses, paying for a portion of the library where they would need to have a library as a standalone. So there's some of it that makes some sense, but we always try to be conscious because an increase of tuition hits one side, an increase in cost can hit the other side, and I think we've always been a pretty aware host.
Because I was just thinking that, like, obviously they benefit from, like, getting a new PA system that can notify people in any space in the building. But maybe if they were just deciding the budget without us, they would make different priorities, like keep extra hours for this teacher or whatever, you know?
More French fries in the cafeteria. Things like that.
Wait, that isn't our priority?
No. I think central office has been very fair and aware of our needs. They've been transparent on the charges. I've had good conversations at times when it doesn't make too much sense to me, and there's been flex. There's been a willingness to hear.
Great.
And I have to say, the space that we're sitting in right now, our librarian has done an amazing job at including CTE in all of the initiatives, and made our teachers feel welcome and our students understand that this space is for all students.
That's great.
It's great to hear. Brendan?
What kind of threats or risks would we face if we raise tuition?
Well, it's a good question. I think there's a sweet spot. I think raising tuition has a greater impact on some of the smaller districts, and to be honest with you, some of our smallest districts provide per capita more students than the larger districts. So there's a sensitivity to not raising the tuition too much, and especially not outstripping too much cost per pupil based on all sending schools numbers. Career and tech ed is more expensive, and the students get an incredible education. And a lot of the sending schools still have to bear the burden of the cost. So I've tried to be sensitive to that. That's why we've not raised very much at all over the last 4 years.
Thanks.
Any last question, Andre?
You've been seeing a declination of enrollment as we have throughout the schools, but has that also affected enrollment in the programs? Is there some that are getting less popular, less populated?
It's an excellent question. There's an unpredictable ebb and flow to programs because our greatest driver is word of mouth for students. There are some great performers like computer animation, web design, and design and creative media, computer systems technology. Building trades over the last 2 or 3 years has done a wonderful job with getting their enrollments up. And then sometimes there's a dip and it doesn't make much sense to us at all.
Okay.
There are some programs that I'm keeping my eye on right now, because we have to right size instruction for the number of students that we have. But typically, the prior board, their guidance was, you have 3 years to follow the enrollment trends, and if they continue to trend down for 3 years, there needs to be some kind of action to either improve the enrollments or decide it might be time to move the offering off of the list.
Thank you.
That's the last question.
I just was assuming that as you were thinking of new initiatives, I think that sounds like you answered that as you were thinking of adding additional things. It may be to grow enrollment, but it might be to replace enrollment.
That's right.
Okay.
And some of those initiatives can be within programs we're already offering, just a change within the curriculum, and others would be entirely different programs.
And entirely different as a process of approval
Through the state.
So tech centers can't operate independently with program offerings.
Imagine what it would be like at the high school.
Yeah. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
I appreciate that. Thanks a lot. Sorry to keep you later.
Okay, so Kathy, welcome.
Oh, these visitors. I'm feeling better than I did last week.
So Kathy's joining us, somewhat still trying to recover from being under the weather. You received the quarterly reports. You found the EWSD General Fund, the CTE Fund, Child Nutrition, and the skating facility. We'll continue to add to these over time, things like Skill Tech, the Dental Trust, other parts that we have, pieces and parts, but these start to round out some of the major funds that we work under. And you can see that they've all been formatted to follow the way that we've been working through the budget so that we can have that consistency as well. And then Kathy, here you go, you can use this button to progress.
And it doesn't seem possible, we're halfway through the year. Actually, we're a little more than that, but we're gonna report on the first half. So we've got a different format, and we'd love your feedback on how we're presenting this to you, so that if you have questions and stuff, or if you'd like it differently. I wanna thank Natasha, our new executive assistant there, for all of her work on this. She did a beautiful job. So we're on target, and we've always been healthy, and we will continue to be healthy, I think, and you'll see that reflects that as we go forward. People are very good about, watching their budgets and spending their dollars. For the highlights of the revenues, the tuition is laid down because we have had a drop in enrollment, so that's to be expected. The parking fees, which we did not charge for, so you'll see on your reports that there's no revenue, though we budgeted for it. And then the technology budget, we actually got some additional E-rate money, so that's exciting. So we'll use that to offset our rates and stuff. In the facilities, though, I was a little surprised at that the revenue had declined. So I asked why that was happening, and that apparently we're using our buildings more internally. And so they're not available to the external population and who we charge for. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, and we want our folks to be able to use the buildings, but then we also don't get the revenues for it. In special education, we have receivables that come in. Some of our sending schools are not paying as quickly as they usually do in the past. I don't know, what the issues are there, but we are following up on that, asking, what we can do to get the revenues to come in. Medicaid is, that's a difficult one because it depends on the billing, and we're caught up right now, so what you're gonna see is in January, February, the money will come in. So it just happens in the first quarter that it's not there. Our grant revenues are down the first half of the year, and that is due primarily to the new grant system that the state implemented. They struggled with it. We've all struggled with it. Every school district has, how to get the awards in there, how to get them approved, and to get the money spent. We can't request money until they've been approved, and then we can put in for reimbursement. In the past, we only did quarterly. We can put in monthly now if we want to. So you'll see that starting to catch up as we get into the third and fourth quarter. On expenditures, I think we're doing really, really well on that. The district-wide, what do we say, that reflects a budget transfer to an inactive account? Oh, yes, and I think that came up the last time that someone said, why is there no budget for this one district-wide account? And what I do, that's more of a bookkeeping entry than anything, just so that you're aware of that if a grant has been voted to be X, but we get approval for less money, I don't want folks to be able to think that they can spend more than what the award was. So, but I can't change the voter approved balance. I have to leave it as it is. So I move money into a 00 district-wide account so that nobody can see it but us. So it's there, nothing will happen to it, but it is reflected on that district-wide account. We did do some moving around on the instructional technology for the communications line so that Ben would have some monies available for what he needed. Put it towards, some of it went towards professional development. Transportation expenses are a little different. We all know that that's been an ongoing issue, but we are trying to encumber the PO so we know where we stand with our purchase orders on transportation. Child nutrition, we did not do a subsidy this year, so we're hoping that they'll break even. We'll see how that goes as we move into more of the year. I like this little graph. It kind of gives us a little idea of what and where we are at this point in time with our revenues. You can see we're down a little bit, but those will pick up when you see the third quarter report. Expenditures, of the 100% of expenditures, 62% of it is instructional, which is really where we expect it to be. 13% for support, and then 25% for the administrative. The revenues versus the expenditures, we from one year to the next, they are pretty much in line. How they were from last year to this. I don't know if you can even read that. That's really hard to see. Let me move on past that. Well, all right. So where we are at the first half is 57% unspent, 43% spent, and that would indicate, because we have so many of our teachers that get summer pay, that you'll see a big balloon payment in June, and that kind of makes up. So it seems to, make sense where we are. So before I move on to CTE, I do want to go back to that because I do know that you folks were talking about the shared portion of the, and if you have your notes in front of you, because it's not on the slides, that the revenue traditionally did not have a shared service as a revenue, and we are making sure that that's a little more transparent this year so that money's there. Last year, I didn't make the expense or take the payment until the end of the year, so you didn't see it reflected halfway through. This year, I did half of it for the revenue, and you'll see on the expense side for the Center for Technology the offsetting expense. So they're there, and that's why there's such a big bubble in the shared cost.
And that's the sort of the explanation of why an 87.2% positive difference under local revenue is that we're charging and getting the shared cost revenue from CTE. And then you'll see in the resulting expense kind of bubble for CTE, they're being charged and sending the revenue.
Yep.
The state money, the big difference there is that there's no rescission in our ed funding. So if you recall, last year was a portion of the year in which they took back 65% of, to get to that 13 million. So our first payment was shorted going into December. That didn't happen this year to that same extent, so there's a large bubble there as well.
On our local, we actually are doing really well on our interest, that revenue that we're taking in, because we've not had to borrow any money, so that's pretty exciting. We are actually making money on it. Oh, I did want to say on the board expenses too, you're gonna see that your board expenses are down from last year, and that's because, for some reason, the auditors haven't charged us yet. So I'm not sure why, but that's okay, well.
They will.
They will, they will. And safety and security was up a little bit because of they're paying for their telecommunication costs now. But other than that, I think that, we look really, really, positive in both revenues and expenses. CTE, they're so nice and easy and clean. I love working with their stuff. They did have an increase in their Carl Perkins Award, so that's up a little bit. The expenses are also up a little bit because they had increase in their technology-related supplies and general supplies, which they did earlier in the year than they normally do. But they seem to be on target for their revenues and expenses. Child nutrition, the major variance in expenses is that decrease in salaries. That because we have two directors' salaries that are no longer there, so that did have a decrease in their overall expenses. But they seem to be on target. I don't see much variance in that one either. Do you, Brian, on child nutrition?
No,
Pretty-
they've been managing their food costs, and their
Yeah.
salary costs are down. They're about 5% behind budget right now in revenue, and that's some participation as well as some delinquencies. But it's a nice improvement of over $100,000 between quarter 2 18 and quarter 2 19. So, performance report, good positive variance.
I have a question for you. The chart, the revenue chart or expenditure chart that you sent for child nutrition had a zero value for fiscal year 19 for summer food. Why was it zero? Or why is it zero?
Ask me that question again.
The object code food, or did you say summer food?
It said summer. It listed it as being summer food, 3455. It has a zero value. This is not a chart that was sent in the organizational materials that was
Yeah,
sent.
it would be these reports, right? So child nutrition.
I have some right here. Oh, it's up there. It's state revenue. Is that what you mean?
Oh, that's the range.
Code 3455.
Yeah, it is classified under the state topic, and then Diane had the exact right number classification.
It looks like
It looks.
I got my
have
cheat
that.
sheet.
Yeah, it looks
didn't
like
bring my
something that
computer.
in 18 we had budgeted 5,000 for, had received none. In FY 19's budget, we stopped budgeting for it.
Right.
It's probably revenue that comes in through an overall line up above, as far as either in a reimbursement or
And that's-
through the feds.
That's state money. Anything, yeah. So apparently they're not getting that any longer?
Okay.
Or
All right.
haven't
I'm
for
just-
a couple of years.
Because I thought we were,
federal.
okay, because I assume we're still doing the program, and I went, why am I seeing a zero value for summer food?
Yeah, we're still
That's
based out
right.
of Maple Street for summer meals.
The rate, not a lot to say about there. They're looking nice and clean.
And some of the rink too, that I'm not sure what it is, but you recognize just in an accounting practice that we have, we work on a modified accrual basis, which means that, sometimes we may be receiving revenue in that is for a period extending beyond this quarter. We recognize 100% of the revenue at this moment, but we modify that cash basis at the end to accrue everything and to do it that way. So that's why that $71,000 is a spike in skate time contracts. but it may also be a prepayment
Right.
for time still to be used.
Questions for Kathy? Brendan?
So I had asked this question through an email to Martha and then to Brian, but if we face another government shutdown, is there concern that our federal revenue for the child nutrition program could be affected?
We get notified that if it will, it almost did this last time.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
But they usually keep us posted if that's gonna happen. It could, potentially, but
Yeah,
it
duration
didn't.
could certainly impact it.
Right.
I mean, we were told by the state and the feds that we had until March 31st while we were undergoing the last shutdown.
Right.
So if there were to be another one, I'm not sure if that March 31 stays the same or if it gets pushed out subsequently the amount of time we've been open for business.
Yeah.
And I presume that if those federal dollars went away, we would not be able to provide the same level of service to our.
Devastating across the country.
Yeah.
You referenced that the decrease in the food expenditure was due to personnel decrease, but at one time, some of that had been actually transferred to another side of the house and was not showing, so is that still prevalent?
So,
The consulting.
so the savings.
Consultant fees were transferred to the administrative side or the superintendent's office.
Under fiscal. So the savings right now, the large savings of about $147,000 in comparison to last year at this time is due to food cost savings and personnel, largely personnel.
From the food expenditures?
Yeah, food expenditures and personnel savings.
Okay, but the question is,
And
regarding-
and a portion of that personnel savings has come out of child nutrition.
Right.
And that person is working part-time as a purchasing specialist, and they show up in the fiscal budget inside the EWSD.
So you're having a decrease on one side, but an actual increase on the other?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that increase in another is also decreased by having no legal support and having those other series, as well as another administrator in the district that dropped down from full-time to a contract level, and other support staff that we didn't replace over the course of time through attrition.
And a retiree too.
We had, we had the, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Kim?
Maybe following up on that, or maybe I'm just not getting it right, but it's Bob, right, who is supporting purchasing with child nutrition?
No, it's supporting the fiscal office supporting.
No, understood. I'm just trying to understand when or if he's fully retired, that service remains at central office level as opposed to billed back to any of those categories. Was he supporting child nutrition? I apologize because
Yeah, so he was.
in his other role. I was just trying to think about subsidy.
Yeah, so
if
up until
necessary.
June 30th of 18, he was the director of the EWSD food service.
Yep.
He retired from that position, as we also had a coordinator of farm to school retire at the same time. Both of those positions were not filled.
Yep.
So we're operating with a manager and a site supervisor within food service, and we've changed around the position of farm to school coordinator. Bob, like Ellen did, we took that expertise and we kept it within the budget rather than taking all the savings across the board. And he's devoted himself to purchasing and has been doing work around, we'll be engaging with Kathy around purchasing module within it, looking at regulations and so forth. He's not billed back whatsoever to child nutrition, so he
And
doesn't.
if he were to retire, that position doesn't need to be rebuilt into child nutrition, nor would it necessarily be rehired for. We're building capacity within our current administration.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. That was
And the intention is that he will retire for good, and that position won't be filled.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Kathy? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Drive safely.
I shall do that.
Feel better. Okay, let's move on to, so you have received your status update on transportation. Beth, is there anything you want to highlight, or do you just want folks to ask questions?
Well, what would you like? Would you like me to highlight through or ask questions? I'm ready and prepared for both.
Maybe you could, since we're on tape,
Okay.
maybe you could highlight a few things that you think would be important to the public.
Okay.
And let's try to reserve most of the time for questions.
Okay. So we have secured now 2 people for the CDL permit to move through to their final road test. One did drop out, unfortunately. And then the contingency village busing option, there were 4 different, and Brian can catch me if I get this wrong, but my understanding is there were 4 different routes brought to Mountain Transit. They together then worked on Jamie and Mountain Transit. They drove the routes and figured out the best ones, and the best one would require 3 drivers. And that had to do with walk time and distance of walking. If we were to go with the 2, it compromised some of our guidelines. In the transferring students from one bus to another, I'm not crazy about doing in the mishap of something happening as they're transferring from one bus to another. And then, so the contingency service plan routes will be finalized in 2 weeks and waiting for the 3rd driver. So some things that are happening as far as wins, the new Mountain Transit manager has, they're working on building the relationship with the district. That's going well. There's some safety work being done at Founders for pickup time. And then also some work done at, or will be done with the Essex Elementary, and same for the safety and vehicles. So I think one of the things that Jamie has been working on, and I asked him exact same time that he said he was going to work on it, it was kind of a strange thing, that the mandatory drug and alcohol testing for transportation for the employees, he's been working on, and we will bring that to the board with some other policies when we dive into some more policy work. Let's see, the one thing that he's worked on, the last day that we had to close just Westford because some of the routes, which is always hard to do. I don't like doing that. And so Marcy and Jamie went out and drove routes and figured out some of the routes were passable and could have taken a bus. So Jamie's creating, which he's done and has experience doing, some foul weather routes. So there'll be alternative stops. They do this in Champlain Valley School District often. Actually, my daughter works there, and we'll get the phone call of all the routes, the alternative routes that for pickup. So that's what Jamie has been designing, and then that'll go out to families. So the robocall will say when the alternative routes, so we won't have to cancel Westford, which will be great. We continue to have staffing challenges with special ed for the drivers and the parents that ride on the buses. Let's see, another staff member gave their notice from Mountain Transit. So School Spring currently has 8 bus drivers within 25 miles of where we are for other districts. So that's a lot of openings. Bus contractors, First Student, Mountain Transit are also recruiting for CDL and non-CDL driving positions. And then I think that the thing that I think is important to note is that since May 2018, Mountain Transit has screened 66 applicants, put 9 new drivers into service, utilized 26 different drivers for Essex Town Services on 13 town routes, persuaded 3 retirees to come back and start the year, and then hung on as substitutes. And then had, in the meantime, the struggling with we've had 5 terminations, 1 left, and a driver shifted from the town to the islands to replace a driver. So those are some challenges that we've had with staffing, as you know.
Questions? Yeah.
So, I believe that it was mentioned in an earlier meeting that the plan for next year is to retain all school start and stop times about the same that they are this year, which means that we cannot rely on better alignment of start and stop times for the high school to solve our busing staffing challenge. And we should anticipate that we need just as much drivers and we'll have just as much problems staffing them. So I was wondering, is there already thought going into place to whatever this contingency plan that can serve the village with 3 drivers, that something similar is going to be established for the town to serve it with less than 13 drivers? Or should we be notifying people at the high school that they may not have similar levels of service next year? Like,
all good questions.
Well, the article, I thought the Essex Reporter did a good job at covering the board's work on policy, and I think I was clear in that, you know, if we face this situation next year, the high school and tech center would lose transportation. So I think that's out there. I think it's been well communicated by the board that that's the intention of the district. I think we have, you know, we have a matter of continuing to sort of double this. I mean, we need to get 66 more applicants and put 9 more drivers in to try to be resilient. I mean, that's where we currently face. I mean, as we plan these contingencies, we do open up possibilities, just like the high school, in which we're doing a route that, you know, previously was using 13 buses to transport the high school. We're now using 3 buses to transport the high school. So we continue to have found, you know, huge efficiencies at some cost of effectiveness, some cost of attractiveness and so forth. But some of this contingency planning in the village has opened up, you know, maybe there are ways to do it. You know, the Red study came out and said it would be 16 buses to serve Essex Junction under the old school alignment times. We changed that to 11. We're shooting for now that we believe we can do it at 6 if it's an integrated system. We've come up with a contingency plan to maybe operate it on 3. So I mean, I think we're showing incredible due diligence of just going after this every single time, trying to counteract the pressures that are somewhat outside of our control. I mean, to design a system that potentially, you know, as Jamie said in the update, you know, potentially based on ridership, 3 buses that could serve K8 in the junction,
Right.
when, you know, 2 years ago, we were talking to the community about 16 buses rolling in Essex Junction. That was the last community, you know, forum that talked about transportation that way. So, I mean, I think we've made some great strides under these incredible constraints. And I think we have more constraints to address.
just the sooner we can communicate about it, the better.
Brendan?
Beth and Brian, are your colleagues across Chittenden County talking about this issue? We're not the only district facing this challenge, and I wonder if there's any urgency to try to find maybe solutions together across the county?
It has not come up except on side conversations, but it hasn't been on an agenda for our regional superintendents. I know Brian has talked with South Burlington, and I don't know about Champlain Valley.
Yeah, so Jamie's actually in regular touch with all the self-performing districts. We can basically be in touch with our counterparts like Colchester, because they also contract through Mountain Transit. You can see South Burlington has 3 vacancies right now.
Right.
You know, we know what happens with a couple of vacancies and what potentially is happening with 3, and they had contracted to be a service provider for Winooski and are having some real difficulties now with that new service demand while having a driver shortage. So, and then Chittenden East is also a self-performer, and they have 2 vacancies, and so they're running on long-term subs at this point in time and trying to shorten, make amends to get through on a daily basis. It's CDL drivers are a crisis across the country, and the conversation goes back to the day that Secretary French came to the central office on a Saturday morning, and Beth and I met with him to talk about that this is a crisis and we need all hands on deck at the governor's cabinet level. While they've made some great strides, we still can't force people to take work that they don't want, especially work that requires 6 to 8 weeks of training.
Tech center program.
So
in an economy where unemployment is extremely low.
And our municipal partners are all, these are bus drivers. If we started to take a look at what Chittenden County has right now, looking for snowplow drivers at the municipal level and at the state level, we have people that are dangerously operating, machinery because there's just no one to switch out with.
They just Al, Diane, Andre, Kim, I think.
Okay, the first question has to do with feedback that we received from the Transportation Committee from public. And that was, if we have drivers to start the process of transporting EJ students, then we should start it with less than 3 and what we have. And if it means we're serving certain schools, fine, but let's start the process. It looks like the position here is it's K to 8 or nothing. And
I think that this guideline is for the 3 buses to be able to do, but we don't know ridership. If ridership is low, then you could do K8 and pick up more. But to do the routes without bus transfers and some other things happening, to do the K5 in 3 routes could be with ridership that we could pick up 8.
currently, we don't have any numbers, and if we don't start, we will never have any numbers.
Right, and it was modeled out with Mountain Transit that the 3 buses would be most efficient way to do it and the safest way without bus transfers and other things.
So could you comment, is it K8 only?
No, this is
K5. She just said K5. She's saying it might be expanded to K8 if ridership were low. But the 3 drivers are needed to do K5 with the way they have laid out the routes.
Can I just add a little bit here? So the pressure that your administration is feeling is to do something sooner rather than later.
Right.
Right. And we understand that we want to work on a most vulnerable age basis as we do that.
Right.
Once we get to July 1, that's the only way that we work. Right? So right now we're working on an age basis, something rather than nothing. When we look at it, none of our schools, our 2 youngest schools, have no geographical boundaries as far as their placements, which we know. That's been a long studied and was covered under the red study.
Right.
So that there's no geographical boundaries there. When we took a look at the 1 bus approach,
right.
And we've heard, Beth and I, we spent 4 nights in the cafeteria as well as hundreds and hundreds of emails talking about start and stop time, what families prefer. They gave us, tremendous, Liz helped us facilitate those. We got huge feedback. Probably feedback that is one could say rivals the feedback that we've received regarding the transportation with what is convenient and what works and what families are looking for. So we've been trying to take all of that in. We've designed a system, a contingency plan that is primarily to serve our 2 K3 schools. Depending upon ridership, that can expand.
Right.
Depending upon how poor the ridership, it could expand all the way to K-8.
Right.
There is, if you go down to 2 buses, you are doing something that makes no efficacy. You're putting kids on buses for an hour and a half to go to school inside of Essex Junction.
Okay.
So, you know, the something as soon as possible route is we're trying to get to, and we're saying it is 3 buses that we feel that we can, that is the matter that we've done. And I would say that there's been a very high degree of expertise going into the modeling that is beyond my capability, well beyond my capability, but with people that have 10, 20, 30 years of transportation experience going into the modeling, as well as asking your principals about things like transferring, about bringing 200 kids to a school so that they can go to Fleming onto another bus to go to Hiawatha and also go to Summit. So while some is, you know, while I'd like to say that there is a high degree of caring, there is also a high degree of due diligence and exposure and liability and expertise that is also going into trying to design a system that will serve our public.
I think the last point was, I know this problem's not going away. So I think it's fair to notify the community that high school transportation may not be available.
And we can do that.
And people can plan on that as a potential at this point, but let people know right up front that's the right thing to do. Thank you.
My question is about an article I heard on the news regarding the local public bus and that they too are having problems. In fact, in talking, I did not follow through to find out which routes they were going to close. And given that, how is the ridership on, you know, our paying the fares for individuals to do it? Is it being successful? Are people taking us up on it?
Yeah, we know from the evidence point from the last time shared the data that it was a high take up on people riding it. We're going through another ridership as we talk about here. We're just starting another window to do the ridership, and we'll check in with Green Mountain Transit. They are having some difficulties. I mean, we're a community that pays a fee. All our taxpayers pay a fee towards Green Mountain Transit to have it. I would say that our uptake on that route going out to Essex is probably one of the things that if it's going to be saved, it's going to be saved because of the decision of the high school to provide free public transportation for grades 6 through 12. And that will be an asset for the community to continue to utilize. If we weren't doing it, it would certainly be a route that was, you know, under 100 people a week that were using it. And now we have hundreds of people a week.
So I lost track. Who else was in the queue?
Kim,
Kim?
Oh, okay. A couple of questions. The mandatory drug and alcohol testing, is that, like, what are we doing now? Is that a policy that
There is
we've
a policy.
had before?
Jamie wanted to add more to the policy. There is one about drug and alcohol transportation, but he wanted to.
That's like on our mandatory
Yes.
list?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
No, it's
the
there. He's
model
adding.
VSBA
Okay,
policy,
so we've
but-
got something
So-
that we're
yeah.
doing
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
those, and
It
it
asked for a
applies to
procedure,
our.
and we didn't have a procedure. So when I
Okay.
reached out to him with the procedure, he's also adding to the policy with procedure.
With procedure.
Yeah.
And that is for just those employed by the district, or those, is that binding our contractors?
Yes.
Binding our contractors, okay. And then the shift of a town driver to the islands route, I thought our islands were being served by Colchester?
It's the Georgia route, I think, is what the intention was. It's the Georgia Fairfax route that we have the
Yeah, we still
39
have that.
students that
Oh.
ride.
And that's one of our buses versus
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
island, okay. And then the last question is, I think, I know we're not doing any change in the start and stop time, but I do think it's reasonable to consider if this problem is not going away, how we can most efficiently align our start and stop times
Yes.
to utilize our resources. And if the high school can't be moved, is there capacity or willingness to consider moving even the earlier grades a little bit earlier? Does that help us? Have they modeled that idea and what differential we need, and can it be accomplished? Because this probably isn't going away.
I mean, we know from a long track record that the differential between the two grade clusters needs to be, 50 minutes.
And does that, I don't actually honestly know what the start and stop times are anymore. I've sort of lost track of it. How close are we to having that?
It would be a departure. So we heard when we created the start and stop times, we heard a lot of pushback from parents and families that the 50-minute gap that had long been standing at Essex Town was something they wanted to have done away with, and also that Essex Junction didn't want, because parents have kids in multiple schools, and there's, even while we provide transportation, we have more than half of our school communities that are driving their students and picking them up. So it was inconvenient. So that was part of the process and the feedback that we incorporated in multiple iterations of going out to the public. By doing that, it collapses the ability to reuse the fleet 2 times, because we've gone over this in a couple of times, it's just mapping out. It takes, as Essex Town found, it takes about a 15-minute gap to be able to do those routes twice. So
I'm sure that you guys had gathered information, but in all the years, I don't remember that being something people were pushing back on. They hated long wait times. It was crappy that little kids were stuck in snowsuits for a long time. But I'm just thinking that differential actually allowed for activity buses or whatever they called them, where you could either do clubs earlier or clubs later.
So we're pretty committed to going back and looking at that differential, despite the community feedback that we heard, because we think that there are a lot of positives to it. We need to reconcile that with the community input, of course, just like when you bring engagement in and you ask people to help make collaborative decisions. If you want to change those decisions, you need to go back out and work collaboratively to change it. But I think we're committed to trying to look at a 15-minute gap so that we can basically double, we can, at least in 5 cases, we have buses that can only be doing a single loop right now because they're K-8 buses doing 1-hour drives. And there's only 15
And is that something you guys are looking at for this year, or to solve the problem? I didn't know.
This seems like a level of detail that's really administrative, so maybe you could push those questions to Beth and Brian offline.
Okay.
Thanks. Andre, were you in the queue?
Yes.
Okay, and then Carrie.
Sure. Given the challenges we're having with student transportation, is there any other threats that we're going to be potentially facing, such as extracurricular, daytime internship transports? Because it seems it's boiling down to lack of drivers. So is there any other threats that may be heading our way with regards to the other transportation that we provide other than to and from school?
I mean, there's always a basic sort of regulator in as far as how many field trips can happen on a certain day, or even athletics, whether they can reschedule to a certain day, if they have to reschedule, if there is transportation or not. I know that just the other day, one of the Essex teams had to, or coming up tomorrow, has to share a bus with another high school. So those occur, those kinds of situations occur now and have for quite some time. But yeah, I mean, this shortage of drivers, when we can jump down to a 5-passenger driver van, then we get out of the whole CDL and we get out of the entire school bus endorsement. Anyone driving more than that needs to have the full endorsement.
Okay.
So that's the barrier.
So I just wanted to follow up on what Al had brought up. We're not necessarily asking that you redesign the whole system for 2 drivers, but that, I mean, we haven't seen what these routes look like, so we're just sort of imagining. But if you put one person operating one person's part of this system, then at least some kids are not theoretically having to walk to school when it's so cold that they can't have outdoor recess for 2 miles. So, I mean, if Patrick's kid is getting a bus ride to school and mine aren't, my kids are no worse off than they currently are when they aren't, but some other kids in Westford are getting a ride to school, right? So putting one bus on the road, doing that bus as part of this system, would to many of us seem to be better than no buses, and then these drivers will certainly be filling vacancies elsewhere in the system before we get 3 operating drivers. Even if they're driving like the EJRP little buses or vans to pick up the students who are most in need, like if there's some way that we can use these drivers.
So, Keely, I would just comment that you may feel okay if Patrick's kid gets picked up in your Stetson, but I'm guessing there are tons of parents in this community who would not feel okay.
Well, but none of their experience would have changed from their current, whereas
Somebody's
a third of the community would
something.
have gotten a positive change.
Right, but somebody's getting.
But somebody is already getting that.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
Well, I think that's
It's one way to look
most
at
of
it.
our
I'm
schools
just,
are already getting that.
I'm just saying, I think there are many people that would not look at it the way you are looking at it. I could be wrong. Okay, any last questions about the transportation update? So, it's such a frustrating situation. It sounds like you've thought pretty carefully about whether there's something you can do with 2 drivers. I think it's right if you could do something that wasn't going to cause more uproar than it's worth. It sure would be nice to do something, but I know that's your goal as much as it's the board's goal, so it's frustrating. Okay, let's move on. Patrick.
Let's move from transportation right into transportation.
Transport's
I have emailed just a little bit ago, probably within the hour, copy of my completed report. I sent it to Ryan, Beth, and Martha as well, so if you can bring it up on the big screen, great. If not, then
You found bus drivers.
It's the big reveal.
I know a lot of truck drivers, but they just don't really live around here. They make a lot more money moving people from
don't
house
have
to house.
77 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One truck driver I know would not work as a bus driver.
My dad is quite happy in Florida, driving old folks from the airport to the golf course and back again.
Sounds much quieter
He
than
does.
He's hired. He's hired. We'll take him.
We'll help with the moving expenses.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure you could convince him to come back
We're
anywhere
not getting
like
up there.
remotely close to a
His own-
climate that has seasons.
His own housing.
Yeah.
Is it not? Are we
He's
not
got
getting
that.
spring?
It's like on a golf course.
Oh, wow.
So.
The villages?
Yeah, believe it.
It's not the villages, is it, Pat?
It is.
It
Actually.
is,
Yeah, oh,
okay.
yeah. He was on board with that.
Excuse me.
This should come up in a second. Okay.
How did you start?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when it comes up, everyone can see it, but if you have it on a computer, you can follow along. I kept to Brendan's format with his monitoring report that we got last regular board meeting. In this one, we're looking at the goal to monitor the implementation of the student transportation plan and support communication to the community. As I set the interpretation on that, compliance with this goal will be continuously ongoing, as opposed to where our last goal had a pretty completed endpoint. This one is one that will, continually be working on. The EWSD Board of Directors will seek compliance by ensuring regular receipt of student transportation updates from the administration while adhering to Transportation Policy C3's monitoring benchmarks. The EWSD Board will use all regular avenues of communication that it possesses to inform status updates, changes, and recommendations to the community at large. The evidence, I stretched back as far as mid-August, since we created these board goals at the retreat, which was after we had our initial presentation about the transportation system's loss of drivers. I began just picking up evidence points as of the 21st. These are a combination both of both sort of both parts of the goal itself, so the monitoring of the implementation and also the communication to the community. On August 21st, we had the large community outreach that was conducted in the auditorium of EHS, where Beth, Brian, Jamie, myself, and Liz were available to answer questions and field them from parents and community members that came. After that point, Ben provided updates to us as a board regarding the transportation plan via email. And then on September 4th, at each subsequent regularly scheduled board meeting, the EWSD board has received from administration an update on the state of transportation throughout the district, which we all have come to learn and love. These updates include successes, threats, and overall changes concerning the student transportation system from the previous update. And the EWSD board has the opportunity to question administration during these updates. Transportation updates have each been collected and presented on the EWSD board website, which I provided a link. These are the updates that we get. These go up onto the website typically the day after we see them in board meetings. And then updates for transportation are also very often, if not almost universally, included within the takeaways that we type up and then present out, not just over the website, but I also communicate those over social media. So we do hit Facebook, and then Ben will usually post on Twitter as well to push that out. The EWS, the school board, to adopt a revised transportation policy on December 18th, 2018. And then scrolling down, within this policy are requirements for the superintendent to provide an annual report regarding the performance of the student transportation system, include in his or her annual report to the board information as to all pupils transported by the school district and the expense thereof, and C, develop procedures identifying and prioritizing how services may be modified and or reduced if resources are insufficient to provide the intended level of transportation services. The EWSD board has requested from administration a draft of procedures ensuring compliance with our transportation policy, with a final draft due to the board for review by March 31st, 2019. So over the last 6 months or so, these are the various steps that we've taken towards this goal. And as I mentioned at the beginning, based on my interpretation of the goal and the evidence that we've collected, the board is currently achieving this goal. We're certainly monitoring the transportation plan and the changes as they come up on a very regular basis, though the goal is necessarily open-ended with some target dates occurring in the future. It does also remain a goal in progress.
Thanks, Patrick. Brendan?
Well done. I guess the only thing I would suggest or that you consider adding, specifically for that community communication piece as another piece of evidence is the numerous interviews that I think both Beth and Brian have done with like the Essex Reporter to communicate to the community at large about some of the changes with transportation. I think that that external communication should be somehow noted in the report as well.
Yeah, I did consider that. I did look up the dates of the various media interviews that were done. I was hesitant to include that in evidence because that wasn't strictly board work. There was administration,
Right.
you know, taking it upon themselves to, you know, push that out. Although now that I think about it, there was one interview that I did, so I could definitely include that in there. I think the administration stuff is enough to put in there. Then yeah, I can absolutely do that.
I think it's worth including because I think it is important to recognize that level of communication happening. And even though it was, you know, redundant to the information we've received, it's also, I think, one of the points of pain has been the communication with the community.
Yeah.
And as much as the communications team has worked on that and has done great work in that direction, I think it's also important to mention some of the outcomes that we've had in the local media.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. There's a pretty, as I was going back through my emails, Ben has collected a list of literally all of the media mentions that we've had in various news outlets or, you know, TV reports. So
Yeah,
I can
just
grab
include
that
that
and
would
just, you know,
be
put that
great
in
to
there,
have.
for sure.
Other comments or questions?
Small comment is that Keely and Kim both helped that night with the questions too. So just for accuracy, if you wanted to add 2 more board members, Keely and
I feel
Kim.
like I was like behind the scenes.
You weren't, but the way it's written, that we were available to answer questions that night, that is what you were, that is what you were doing there. So just for clarification,
No,
we
that's a
had
good
we had many board members supporting this.
And other questions or comments? Thank you, Patrick. That was well done. So our next 2 regular board meetings are going to be very budget heavy. So I'm going to suggest that we take a little break from monitoring board calls. But I would ask each of you to be looking at the goals and thinking about a goal that you might take responsibility for reporting out on, and send that to me, and I'll start making a list and assigning reports after the March 6th meeting. And speaking of the March 6th meeting, I think we are going to move our March 5th meeting to March 6th. So it's a Tuesday to a Wednesday. So if you could note that on your calendars. Okay, let's move on to task team updates, communication.
So we have a meeting of our team on Thursday that we meet with Ben, and we will be looking at the budget communications. We have the email that you sent, Al, to Martha, including some of those ideas, and we're going to use that time to really look at what we can do around budget communications. We're also going to be populating a calendar for the year of engagement and communications efforts that we hope to do for the team. And one more, the Vermont AOT integrated field review. Beth, are you going to talk about that?
I can talk about it more after it happens on Thursday.
Okay. All I know
So-
is that is part of our task team also, that we are Pat and Kim and I Keely and I are going Keely and I are going to be interviewed for that as part of our communications meeting.
Great.
Yeah. And I don't know exactly I don't know actually anything about what it is, but.
Well, they create we don't know the interview questions, so they'll come in with their interview questions, just as I'm going to Burlington and I create my own interview questions when I go around what I'm looking for. So you'll have a group that will come and sit and chat with you and ask you questions. We have quite a few different sessions, which we don't know the questions either, so.
Yeah.
Just gathering information on and to make sure we're meeting ed quality standards. We're really excited. I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
it's
It'll
neat.
be good.
Yeah.
No wrong answers.
And then just the Voices update, that Ben and I are meeting tomorrow to take all the ideas that we have come up with and put it out into an updated report that you'll receive at the end of probably next week. We also met to make sure, did I report on this, that Martha and Kim and Beth and Ben and I all met to make sure that we're working on the same page with the Voices work, the board communications work, and the administrative piece. And we want to make sure that we're being really clear about those different buckets moving forward. Each piece is very important and needs to be distinct, and it looks like Voices is going to take the direction of that building on the equity lens moving forward and taking a leading role in helping figure out how we want to talk about the building equity framework in May and September, and then Voices will once again probably host a bigger community conversation in October. So details will be upcoming probably early next week.
All right, so just to elaborate on that, we have we as a board have a community conversation scheduled for our first meeting in May. So we're going to take responsibility, the board is going to take responsibility for that. And this is going to be the topic of discussion, but we're going to ask Voices to help us with how to facilitate
And
that
design.
and design that conversation. But it will be the board's engagement.
The invitation to the community will come from the board as opposed from Voices or anyone else.
Okay. All right, so next regular board meeting, I think we probably have put a pretty full agenda because Brian says, no, it's the 12th, we're going to spend 2.5 hours, but we're going to go through the full budget on the 19th.
And promise a merger.
And promise a merger. So that's a pretty full agenda. Anything immediate that folks are looking for, Keely?
I'm not sure if this is immediate, but I happened to be speaking to one of the officers of the student body government here at EHS, and he said that they were hoping to attend when we, in the future, discussed the GPA or report cards, and I wasn't sure if that was something that was like on the radar of the administration that we were gonna.
Is this
back on our work plan.
So is that because there was this whole rumor in the community that was wrong?
I have no idea.
So there was a rumor in the community that GPAs were going to be calculated on a quarterly basis. It was never true. So there's been a lot of time and effort put into trying to put that rumor to
Okay,
rest.
I think we had talked about like revisiting what the state of proficiency-based report cards and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Along with like how the GPA change from the end of last year has played out for students this year. Like I feel sure that we've talked about this being something that we wanted to hear about at some point, and I just didn't know when that was gonna happen.
Yeah. Not on the 19th or the 6th, but sometime after that.
Okay.
Patrick?
I think this may have been touched. I apologize if it went into more detail. When I went to the bathroom, I heard that something slightly was coming up about it. But the idea of or the acknowledgement that we're not changing the high school's start time next year, which I think most of us have been anticipating. I realize that while the school start and stop time is not a board decision, I would like to know the rationale behind keeping it, and I have a feeling that that explanation is one that most of us on the board would probably want to hear. So I think it might certainly rise to the level of needing its own agenda item.
Or perhaps just a communication with board notes.
Yeah.
Could work as well.
Yep,
Okay.
if it's an
Anything
explanation.
else?
Yes.
I just want to say thanks to Beth for. I've been really enjoying the book discussion. I've been enjoying the book and the book discussion, and it's not normal board work to do a little book club, and I just want to let you know that I personally appreciate
Thank you.
the work.
Yes.
It was fun today because the high school had the same chapter, so it was kind of, they finally aligned. It was kind of cool to do that. But thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's been good.
Okay. Communications to the community from tonight. I think it's the Black Lives Matter flag, it's the CTE budget, and it's probably transportation. And, I think a mention of second quarter financials and the fact that everything appears to be on track and there are no areas of concern at this time. Okay.
Brian, do those go somewhere? I know the budget button wouldn't necessarily capture the quarterly financials. I'm not sure. Do they go somewhere? Aside being attached to our minutes, probably, right?
They would be on our board page, right?
Yeah, so they're on the board page, but I'm not familiar with what any kind of past practice has been. My interest is to start to post them regularly, build out a finance page.
Finance page.
Yeah,
That's
that
what
would have both the slide deck as well as that, our audited financial statements, any other high stakes reporting that we give. In the past, I've never seen that on anybody's website, but I think it should be there. So that's our intention.
Great. Anything else? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all.